Am I the asshole for my response after my brother-in-law said my dress was inappropriate for a family gathering? Hear me out. So my BIL, my husband's brother, was married to a woman from Greece. Her name is Nana, and the reason for their divorce was because of how much my conservative BIL tried to control her clothes and the places she went. He didn't want the divorce and was hoping Nana would accept the life he offered and stay, but she didn't. This happened 2 years ago. He now moved back with my in-laws and we'd see him more often. He tried to comment on how I dress on multiple occasions and it's unbearable. But since my in-laws said he's struggling and depressed, then I let it go. On Friday my in-laws celebrated my husband's 30th birthday at their home. I wore a heart-shaped blue dress and had my hair up. While we were eating, my brother-in-law pointed at me and said that my cleavage was showing and that I shouldn't have wore this dress because it looked inappropriate for a family gathering. I was utterly shocked. Everyone was staring at me and I felt so embarrassed and on the spot. He looked at me waiting for me to blow up probably, but I laughed and told him, "Knock, knock." He said, "Who's there?" I said, "Nana." Now he paused and seemed confused at the mention of this name. He then faked a laugh and said, "Nana who?" I said, "Nana, your goddamn business what I'm wearing." Okay. He got upset and quickly left the table. My Sills laughed, but my husband and his parents were upset and later said that I was way out of line for bringing up Nana to my brother-in-law, knowing how heartbroken and depressed he is because of her. His mom said that I was petty and didn't need to dig at him just to prove a point. My husband thinks I'm in the wrong as well and that I was being deliberately hurtful by bringing up Nana. Not the asshole. WTF? He drove his wife away by trying to police her clothes, and he has the sheer nerve to bring that subject up with you? You did need to dig in to show him that his ex-wife was not an aberration. Any woman would find it abhorrent to have a man dictate what she can or cannot wear. Not the asshole. You should put the heat on your husband and ask him, "Why do you think I should accept your brother disrespecting me? Do you think it is acceptable for him to speak to me like that?" If your husband is willing to just sit by and let his brother act like a pig because it doesn't affect him, he isn't being a good partner. Not the asshole. I sincerely doubt he's heartbroken and depressed. I suspect his ego is wounded because his ex resisted his attempts at control. What he said to you was entirely inappropriate. It's also entirely inappropriate that his family continues to enable his behavior. Not the asshole. Depressed? Heartbroken? Yeah, no, he's sulking because Nana refused to be controlled and manipulated a second longer and is not using you as a target, outlet. Don't apologize, but feel free to have a long talk with your husband about how you're not taking BIL's shit anymore, so he should probably do what he should have done the first goddamn time and put his brother in his place. My husband thinks I'm in the wrong as well and that I was being deliberately hurtful by bringing up Nana. Husband is partially right. You were being deliberately hurtful, and you did it brilliantly. Not the asshole. I'd be proud of that burn. I'll bet the reason your sisters-in-law laughed is because they have likewise been blessed with his advice. Not the asshole. That's the kind of response I would only ever think of 4 hours after the initial interaction. You are amazing. Not the asshole. Dude is a controlling asshole. He tried to control his wife and she, rightfully, left. Now he's trying to control how his Sil dresses. Nope. He is 110% wrong. The sooner he realizes that he has no power to police what anyone wears, the happier he'll be. If it takes reminding him of his wife who left him to get him to the realization, well, that's just what it's going to take. Am I the asshole for choosing my niece over my daughter? I have a daughter, Wendy 14, and a niece, Claire 15. Claire lost both her parents when she was very little and I've been raising her ever since. Wendy and her mom live far away and she has custody, so I only see her once a month, so I have a closer relationship with Claire and we have a lot more in common, but I love them both equally. A while ago I got a bonus at work and I decided to go on a trip, but I couldn't afford to take both girls and also the girls don't get along, which is mostly Claire's fault, I admit. So no one would have fun if I took them both, so I had to pick one, and since Wendy can go with her mom if she wants, I decided that it's only fair if I take Claire. So we went to the trip, but ever since then Wendy has stopped talking to me because she thinks it's not fair that I never take her anywhere and choose my niece over her, but I've raised Claire and I consider her my daughter, so I don't think I did anything wrong. My ex, however, is calling me an asshole and says that I always favor Claire, but that's not true, so am I the asshole? Edit. Can y'all stop assuming so many horrible things about Claire? She is just a kid and the girls fight like all siblings do. Sometimes it's even Wendy who starts the fights. No one is bullying anyone here. I am not rewarding her, but if your kid does something wrong you can't punish them forever. I get it, I am an asshole. I am gonna talk to both girls and see how I can fix this. I will update again. You are the asshole. If they're both under your care, you need to treat them as equally as possible. Should have taken both or taken neither. Or planned a comparable trip to take your daughter on separately. Edit FFs, people. Op is his daughter's father regardless of how many days a month or year he sees her. The exact custody agreement is irrelevant. He is guardian to 2 children, he needs to treat those 2 children as equally as possible. You are the asshole. Why did you have to take the trip? Nobody was forcing you. You could have taken the trip alone or used the money to do something fun with both your girls. You have really let this relationship fester. You are the asshole instead of going to a trip where you can only take one. Find a trip where you can take both. Info. What did Claire do to Wendy as well? Have you tried to mend their relationship? You are the asshole. Your daughter feels like you replaced her, and you kind of did. So I had to pick one. This line is the core of the issue. You did not have to pick one because you did not have to go camping. You made the choice to go that put you in a position to exclude your daughter. And that's all on you. If Claire doesn't get along with your daughter, then you need to talk to her about it. She's had a rough life, but don't let her be the reason your daughter cuts contact with you. Info. You love Claire and consider her a daughter. Okay, so tell us how you really feel about your actual daughter? You are the asshole. If you can't afford to take both, don't go at all. You're obviously showing favoritism. Even without the context that is sorely missing. YTA, and I'm going to assume Claire has something your daughter doesn't. Or, rather, Claire is the daughter you wish you'd had. There's something here that you're not telling us, but even still, anyone who favors another child over their own without any logical reason is automatically an AW. OMG, you are the asshole. She's being raised by her mother? Whose choice is that? This is beyond AW behavior. I'm speechless, literally cannot find the words to how awful this is, and much my heart breaks for your daughter. Update. Would I be the asshole for calling HR over my coworker using my special dish brush? Too long, did not read. I quit. Original post here. I read every one of your comments, and after talking it out with my partner, I decided to go back to my boss and be more direct with my concerns. Face-to-face communication isn't my strongest suit, so I worried I minimized the depth of my concerns. Before I could even open my mouth, my boss said that there was an HR complaint against me. Apparently, the guy who was aggressively using my brushes said I was bullying him. I must have looked as shocked as I felt because my boss rambled on about how seriously the company takes HR complaints, and he promised he'd try to work it out with me before it escalated. Escalated to what? I asked. He replied before it was escalated to HR. He said that no complaint had been filed officially yet because the complainant, dude with the brushes, did the mature thing and talked to my supervising manager first. I think I might have mentioned in the last post they're buddies. Reddit, I saw red. I told my boss that, actually, I thought HR would need to mediate. I pointed out that my boss and this dude were friends and I had no chance of getting a fair shot at my side of the story. My boss tried to backtrack and even called himself my ally. By that point I had managed to get my bearings enough to tell him I needed to make a phone call. I was sitting in front of my HR representative within the hour, and he was appropriately shocked. He suggested mediation with my boss and the other guy, and I said I'd think about it. That night I talked to my partner and we looked at our finances, and the following day I put in my notice. I've already got some interviews lined up. If it had just been the dish brush, I wouldn't have left. As many people very helpfully pointed out, there are lots of good ways to keep the pumping equipment clean and sterile, and of course I probably always should have kept something that's sensitive to me in my office to begin with. As it is, though, it was pretty clear that my boss is in no way my advocate, and while I would have fought for better treatment out of principle in the past, frankly this job just isn't worth it. I want to thank you all for your comments, even those who thought IWBTA. My last day is Friday and I was considering leaving a pile of bottle brushes in every cabinet out of spite, but that's an expensive middle finger to a dude who already stole 2. I'll just have to hope for karma in the end. Honestly, I wish you'd nailed their hides to the wall before you left. The asshole and your ex-supervisor were aiming to intimidate and railroad you into accepting their gender-based harassment, and it would have been nothing more than they deserved to get chewed out by HR and receive whatever other punishment they handed down. Even with the job not being worth it, It's infuriating to know these guys pretty much got away with how they treated you and will likely continue the same way at that company. If you were a diabetic, would your insulin be fair game to take and sell because it's kept in the communal fridge? This is harassment. I'm so sorry, Op. What was your boss's reaction to you putting in notice? It's ridiculous that your coworker lodged a complaint against you. He was the one using your property without permission. At the risk of sounding dramatic, he was endangering your child's life by messing with how you clean your pump. I'm glad you're able to get out of that environment, but sad that he won't receive any consequences. I hope you can spread far and wide, Glassdoor, about the company's toxic work culture. People need to know. You're also filing an HR complaint before you leave. Right? We both know nothing will happen, but get it on record somewhere. Send an email. Do something so that if there is a follow-up to this, your story will still be there even if you aren't. I would still go through with the complaint and report them to the government. This is harassment of a breastfeeding mother, which is covered under the discrimination laws. They both broke the law by trying to bully you with an HR complaint to get you to shut up. Your HR representative knows what's going on and they should both get harshly reprimanded at the very least. They need to be punished. Not the asshole. Good for you, Op. I would say that this is gender-based harassment, interfering with medical equipment. Your old employer is lucky you didn't report them to the government. Am I the asshole for paying for a more expensive suite because I hated my husband's surprise? I know this sounds but I'll explain. Me, 40F, and my husband Sam, 43M, have 3 kids. After the birth of my youngest son, Sam and I almost never went on a romantic trip alone, as it was very difficult to reconcile for several reasons. When my youngest son turned 18 and moved because of college, I was very excited, because we always agreed to go to France to stay in a wonderful hotel and a fancy room, because it was my dream, and with 3 children, I couldn't do it totally. My husband then asked to make a surprise. He would run after everything, booking restaurants, booking a hotel, plane ticket. But I told him which hotel I wanted to stay and the type of room, as it was always my dream trip with him. We have an excellent financial condition, so we could easily pay for it. We arrived at the hotel, he spoke to the receptionist and we went to the room. I was in shock when I found my children and mothers waiting for us. My excitement went downhill from there, and honestly I couldn't hide it, because it wasn't what I imagined it to be, and it got worse when he said that because there were too many people to pay, he got cheaper rooms and that our son would sleep with us, because it was more cheaper. I tried to keep up appearances, but I gave my husband that look, and when I could, I went to the receptionist and asked for a better room for me. I paid with my service bonus, which is something my husband and I don't share, agreed between us. My husband was super annoyed, saying that this was a rude thing to do and that he wanted to have a family time but couldn't afford something more expensive. In addition to having reacted badly to his surprise. It would be everyone's first time and he wanted to give this moment for the first time at the same time to everyone. He didn't even want to go to my room. I loved visiting all the places, but having the presence of 5 more people. It was extremely discouraging. I love my children, my mother and my mother-in-law, but it was my dream to have a romantic trip for 2. It is worth saying, every year, except a pandemic, we travel to another country. We have never been to France. The trip was okay. My husband and I were obviously not doing very well. When we got home, he said my attitude of paying for a more expensive suite was childish, and make everyone uncomfortable, and that my discouragement spoiled our trip. Am I the asshole? Extra. Yes, when I said I wanted to go to France, I said I wanted a romantic trip only for 2. Extra. As I understand the reason, he said he did it because it would be our first family trip after 2 years without traveling and that we could do this trip now and do one in a few months, just the 2 of us. Not the asshole. Your husband knew exactly what trip you were expecting. He knew what hotel and room you were expecting. He decided to change it and was upset when you weren't okay with him unilaterally changing the plans. I'm sure his logic was, we do a family trip someplace every year, so this should be that trip. Why wouldn't it be? But if he wanted that to be that logic, it needed to not be a surprise. It needed to be a discussion. Because he knew that you guys had waited to do this trip until there were no kids left in the house. His attitude of thinking you had spoiled the trip when he was the one who had as a problem. Who hasn't heard of a romantic trip for 7? That's every new empty nester's dream, isn't it? You specified you wanted a romantic trip for 2 to France. He invited your children and mothers along as a surprise. You are not the asshole. But in my opinion paying for a more expensive room is the least of your problems. I would be asking him why did he invite the others along and think you would like it when he knew you wanted, and were expecting, a romantic trip for two? Not the asshole. I'm not sure what's wrong with your husband but who thinks making the romantic couple's vacation your partner has been dreaming of for years into a family vacation is a good surprise. What's wrong with the rest of your family? If my brother-in-law told me we were going to surprise my sister on the trip she's been telling me was her couple's trip, I'd have shut that down. Not the asshole. You told him you wanted this to be a romantic trip and he arranged to have your son stay in your room. He's clueless. What's with all the comments asking, were you absolutely, 100%, clear that you said you only wanted it to be you two? Not the asshole op. I would be upset as well. You guys have been together that long and we're going to try and pretend he didn't know? PFF. Info. Not to be completely out of left field, but how are the two of you doing relationship-wise otherwise? The first thing that came to my mind when reading this was, this is a man who does not want a romantic trip with his wife. It's like he's doing this because he wants the family but needs to tell his girlfriend that the marriage is dead. Not the asshole. Sorry he ruined the trip. You waited years specifically for all the kids to be gone and he seriously invited them and both your mothers? He massively dropped the ball on this one.